So, welcome to another Times Radio Frontline recap. I'm looking back at some of the videos and some of the issues that have happened over the last week. I'm Philip Ingram. I currently present Times Radio Frontline. I'm a former senior British military intelligence officer and global commentator on all matters defence, geopolitics, security, cyber, terror, and anything else people ask me to comment on. Got some good videos for you this week, but a couple of things I want you to have a quick look at. Here we've got Vladimir Putin in a meeting with officials from Iran.
Вы знаете, мы когда-то предлагали нашим иранским друзьям поработать в области системы ПВО. Ну, так большого интереса тогда партнеры не проявили, ну и все. Что касается договора, о котором мы сказали, о стратегическом партнерстве, там нет статей, связанных с оборонной сферой. Это второе. А третье, нас наши иранские друзья об этом и не просят, потому что практически нечего обсуждать. Наше предложение заключается в другом: создавать систему, не отдельные поставки, а систему. Вот это, мы этим в конечном итоге мы когда-то обсуждали, но иранская сторона интереса к этому особого не проявила, и все это заглохло. А что касается отдельных поставок, да, конечно, мы эти поставки осуществляли в свое время. Это никак не связано с сегодняшним кризисом. Это было такое, что называется, регулярное сотрудничество в области военно-технической сфере. Причем в рамках международных норм ни Иран ничего не просил от нас того, что нарушало бы известные нормы, под которыми стоит подпись Российской Федерации. Ни мы ничего не делали. Мы всегда оставались в рамках нормативной, международной нормативной базы.
So Putin, he's talking about two things here that are interesting. In the meeting with Iran, he's talking about how Russia had offered to give Iran a comprehensive air defense system. And I think he hints, my Russian isn't as good as it used to be, he hints to it being a rival to the Israeli Iron Dome system. I'm bluffing, I can't speak Russian. But then says Iran wasn't interested and didn't follow through with the deal, and that's why they didn't supply it and everything else. I think the bottom line in this is the relationship that Russia has got with Iran. There's a formal agreement in place. Iran has supplied Russia with Shahed 136 drones and drone technologies to manufacture them inside Russia. Russia had promised some advanced fighter jets to go to Iran, which haven't been delivered. But the war that's going on between Iran and Israel at the moment has thrown a lot of that relationship out with the bathwater, I think, is what Putin is hinting at. And his second beat, his second piece that Vladimir Putin talks about is that he'd be willing to sit down and talk to Donald Trump. But then in talking to Donald Trump, he puts a lot of caveats into what it is that he is saying. Listen to him here.
Она была бы, безусловно, в высшей степени полезной. Ну, я согласен с президентом Соединенных Штатов. Она, конечно, должна быть подготовлена и закончиться какими-то позитивными результатами. Трек хороший выбран. Мы несколько раз говорили с президентом Трампом по телефону. Мы с большим уважением относимся к его намерению восстановить отношения с России по очень многим направлениям, в сфере безопасности, в сфере экономической деятельности. Знаете, у меня надежда на то, что господин Трамп не только политик, не только человек, которому американский народ доверил судьбу своей страны, он еще и бизнесмен, и в этом я вижу большой плюс в том, что он все считает. И считает он, поскольку он стал богатым человеком, видимо, считает он хорошо. Значит, он считает, к чему приведут те или другие шаги в отношении России. Сколько это будет стоить налогоплательщикам, сколько это будет стоить экономике США. Получит она от тех или других шагов какой-то плюс или, наоборот, упадет в минус. И мы видим сейчас интерес американского бизнеса к выстраиванию отношений с Россией. Есть уже контакты между крупными нашими компаниями, которые хотят вернуться на наш рынок и вместе работать. Это, в общем, в целом вселяет такой определенный сдержанный оптимизм. И рассчитываю на то, что и президент Соединенных Штатов, и его ближайшее окружение это увидят, услышат, значит, вместе с представителями бизнеса будут приниматься решения, направленные на восстановление российско-американских отношений.
And the caveats that Vladimir Putin puts into wanting to talk with Donald Trump basically turns around and says that anything that Vladimir Putin wants is what he'll accept. Anything that Donald Trump wants, if Vladimir Putin doesn't want it, he won't accept. Donald Trump's not going to accept that. Whether there's going to be a meeting between the two or not, I don't know. I doubt it. Okay, I've got two videos for you that I'm recommending to you this week. Both of them are interviews that I conducted. The first one is with Professor Vlad Milyenko. Now, Vlad and I go through a number of different points. The big one that came out for me was Vlad turning around and saying, given what is going on inside Europe and America withdrawing, Ukraine could seriously look at developing its own nuclear weapon capability, its own nuclear warheads. And we discussed that Ukraine has got the knowledge, it's got the ability to get weapons grade plutonium from its old Soviet nuclear reactors, because he described them, I think, exactly as plutonium manufacturing centers where the energy, the power that came from them was a secondary consideration. But then whenever we get into further discussions, it's talking about Putin and Putin's psychology. And Vlad doesn't hold back on his thoughts for Putin. Listen to what he's saying. But then we get into a little bit of an analysis about the impact of the conflict in Iran and the Iran-Russian relationship that's there, and the fact that Russia is winning out of it at the moment for two reasons. It's pushed the Russia-Ukraine war further down the press agenda, but also the political agendas of different countries that are around. And the second thing is it's put oil prices up, and oil prices going up means it's easier for Vladimir Putin to fund his illegal conflict with Ukraine.
Given that paranoia obviously rules the Kremlin, and the really targeted attacks by the Israel on all the leadership, military leadership of Iran, getting them in their bathrooms, I think that's probably must be worrying Kremlin, given that Ukrainians have been quite successful in hitting strategic nuclear bomber fleet of Russia.
Well, I also find it interesting that Mossad had smuggled elements of drones into Iran that they assembled and then used those drones to attack Iranian airfields. And I think we've heard about that. We had Operation Spider's Web in Ukraine that seemed to come in. But Russia had a comprehensive strategic partnership agreement with Iran over support for Russia's war with Ukraine. Do you think that's dead now? And what do you think the impact will be on the things that Russia is getting from Iran to help support its actions into Ukraine, in particular the knowledge behind the Shahed 136 drones? But I suspect there's also components and other things that are still coming from Iran to help Russia assemble them inside Russia. Do you think we're going to see a bit of an impact on that?
That definitely will happen. The impact will be in Ukraine's favor, because obviously Iranians will not be able to supply Shahed drones to Russia or help to produce them. Or also we've heard that they were also supplying missiles, ballistic missiles for testing in Russia that never been used so far, but obviously will never be used now, given that Iran needs those ballistic missiles themselves, or at least for now. And given that Israel is hitting all these factories of drone producing factories in Iran, I think that's probably a positive for Ukraine, given that Iran definitely will not be able to support Russian effort. The difference between the strategic partnership between Iran and Russia from North Korea one is that in the North Korean-Russian partnership also has a stipulation of troop support. So if North Korea is attacked, Russia is supposed to send troops, and if Russia is attacked, North Koreans obviously have sent troops to fight in Ukraine. The Iranian-Russian deal doesn't have that proviso. So no Iranians in Russia or no Russians in Ukraine, in Iran. It's not as really strategic as the North Korean one. But definitely it's quite a big hit on Iran, given that Syria is gone. So Iran is next. So Russia is losing all the Middle Eastern assets that they've had so far. And that is having quite a big impact on the morale of the Russian, the fascist bloggers and all the kind of Z bloggers, because they they see their, this mighty state has been dismantled with very precise attacks.
Certainly, a lot of the oligarchs that underpin the politics that there is in Russia rely on and have relied for many years on their influence within the Middle East, and then that influence in the Middle East acting as a bridge into influence in Africa and other places where they make their billions of dollars through illicit trade and other things. Do you think that that pressure that's coming in as they lose that Middle East support base where they were making lots of money is going to put additional pressure politically from the oligarchs inside Russia on Vladimir Putin to start to do something? And is there anything that he can do?
Potentially, yes. And lots of them moved to Dubai in 2022, as we know, or Israel, and now they are under, obviously, in a war zone. I think the Russian leader will have quite a serious decision to make in the autumn when the Russian offensive, the last offensive, potentially fails to deliver on various geostrategic aims, and Putin will have then to decide whether to call it a day or to escalate. And the escalation probably will require a mobilization of troops, not just buying people with a lot of payouts, but to mobilize it for free. They've only done it once in October 2022. If you remember, 300,000 people were mobilized, and they're still, well, those who are alive are still there. And also recently, the Russian, probably most infamous Russian oligarch, Malafeyev, had hosted a 2-day extravaganza in Russia called Future Russia 2050 Forum, inviting gorgeous George Galloway and various other lunatics to that event. Dugin, the father of Elon Musk, was the biggest hit. And a few other kind of renegades from Western politics. And the manifesto they produced, Russia 2050, calls for the centralized economy. Obviously, the movement of the Orthodox Patriarch from Constantinople to Moscow, mobilization, and it's a kind of a proper fascist, kind of theocratic religious state. So I think in October Putin will have kind of an option either to de-escalate and go for a ceasefire, or then to go proper fascist.
Moving on to the next interview that I did this week that I would ask you to watch. It's with my old friend Hamish de Bretton Gordon. Now, Hamish commanded the British Army's nuclear, biological and chemical defence unit. He's a global commentator like me on geopolitics and all matters, and we've known each other for many years. And again, we explore that issue about what is going on in Iran and how that is good for Russia from a financial perspective. But we also then get into a bit of a discussion about the links between Iran, North Korea and Russia and that relationship and where China sits within it. And the Iran-North Korea-Russian relationship is much stronger than China, who Hamish quite aptly describes as continuing to sit on the fence, but also recognizes that Russia is wholly reliant on China for technology and support, and that support includes buying Russian oil and everything else. But that symbiotic relationship between Iran, North Korea and Russia is much more down to North Korea providing troops, ammunition and other military material, Iran only providing technology, understanding to manufacture Shahed 136 drones, and it was providing drones. It may still be providing components for those drones, but not anymore, I think.
It's been startling, Putin's silence, his alleged close ally in the Middle East, Iran, as you've articulated before, supplying him with so much important kit. In their hour of need, Putin has sort of, not quite given them a couple of fingers, but has offered himself as a negotiator, which is almost beyond parody that Putin is going to come to the peace. But yeah, I think it is much to the direct detriment of Kyiv. Everybody is looking to the Middle East, and as we mentioned earlier, and as Trump has said many times, his focus is Middle East and Indo-Pacific. He's much less interested in in what's happening in Europe. And I think some of the second order or even first order, the fact that the price of oil has gone through $80 a barrel because of this, but part of one of the few good things that Trump was suggesting is he was going to drive oil below $40 a barrel, and with most of Putin's foreign currency and reserves coming from selling oil to the Chinese and the Indians, at $40 a barrel, there's barely enough money to keep his war machine going. At $80 a barrel, that's a different story. So, it's an unfortunate consequence of what's happening in the Middle East that, it really hasn't helped Kyiv in any way at all.
Again, the Russian newspapers today picked up on that very fact that the oil price going up and potential restrictions on the volume of oil that Iran's going to be able to export will just be beneficial to Russia, especially when it comes to contracts with China and everything else. So they're seeing this as very positive. And again, the Hamas attack on Israel, the one thing from my perspective that seemed to achieve was taking the war in Ukraine off the headlines. And we've been talking about what's going on in the Middle East almost ever since. And that's kept Vladimir Putin in a stronger position. It's all frighteningly linked, especially when you look at this axis of evil between Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China, as people keep talking about. Do you think there's a proper link there that we should be worried about?
Well, I think there's certainly a link between Iran, North Korea, and Russia. And one of my big concerns is with ammunition going from Iran and North Korea to Russia, what is going the other way? And, if it is intelligence around developing nuclear weapons capability, which I expect it probably is, then that is what one's concerned about. The North Koreans seem to have some sort of warhead. They have some sort of viable missiles, but the smart money is they don't have the technology to wire them all together at the moment. Now that would very easily come from Russia, I expect. And in the same vein, we're talking about what's happening in Iran with their centrifuges and developing uranium to a level of enrichment that they can then weaponize it. We know they have missiles, but having the technology to put the two together is a concern that some of that might be flowing Russia-wise. I think when it comes to China, I'm sort of less certain. I think China is playing the game that China always plays, being very, very silent at the moment, sitting so firmly on every single fence that they can sort of lean each way. And of course, there are so many dynamics that Putin, rather Trump, very much sees the Chinese as his main adversaries, economically and militarily, and that is almost a separate entity that is happening at the moment. That perhaps we're not keeping a close eye, but maybe that's what the Americans really are focusing on, and in a way they might be right, because any conflict between those two countries would be hugely more significant than virtually anything else. And then we hear that Trump and the government in Beijing have done a deal over tariffs, and again, it's difficult to sometimes understand what Trump's saying when he's doing a deal and when he's not doing a deal, and again, the ambiguity coming out of his mouth, I don't think through it's any sort of his vast intellectual superiority. I think his attention span is rather short for the president of the United States. So we shall see. So I'm the triumvirate of Iran, Russia, and North Korea. Yeah, that is a huge concern. China, that's a different issue. Could be as bad, but I don't think it's necessarily interred in this one.
So thank you for watching Recap this week. If you want access to exclusive content, please sign up for Times Radio membership and you'll get it early. You can also find us on your favourite podcast provider. So just go onto your favourite podcast provider and search for Times Radio Frontline, and we should pop up. I hope we do. Thank you for watching. Goodbye.